Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. When Shantae was originally released in 2002, it was a commercial flop, despite receiving primarily positive reviews. This was likely due to it being a title exclusive to the Gameboy Color, in spite of the system's successor, the Gameboy Advance, having already been released. The developer, Wayforward, nevertheless wanted to make a follow-up game, and began development on a sequel for the Game Boy Advance. Sadly, Wayforward failed to find a publisher for this title, and it would be ultimately cancelled in 2004. Amazingly, this game, now titled Risky Revolution, has resumed development, and after 20 long years will be released in 2024. At the time of this recording, the Shantae series is in a good place, but that wasn't the case in the early 2000s. With the commercial failure of the first title and the GBA sequel being scrapped, Shantae would have no new games for over 7 years. It wouldn't be until 2010 that a new Shantae game would be released, called Shantae Risky's Revenge, released exclusively on the digital store for the DSi, the newest iteration of Nintendo's DS line of handheld consoles at the time. Risky's Revenge would receive a similarly positive reception as the original. Though I'm not sure how well it performed sales-wise, Risky's Revenge would do well enough to draw back interest in the series. The game would soon be ported to current-gen systems in 2016, as Risky's Revenge Director's Cut, which added a new mode originally exclusive to the iOS port of the game. The Switch port of the Director's Cut is the version we'll be looking at today. Crack that whip, return to Monkey, and let's turn the page to Shantae Risky's Revenge. Sometime after the defeat of Risky Boots and her steam machine in the prior game, Shantae and her friends are attending the annual Relic Hunter Expo, of which Shantae's uncle, Mimic, is participating. Mimic unveils his most recent discovery, and at first glance it appears to be an ordinary lamp. However, the item seems to shock Mimic, and Risky Boots is quick to crash the event with her crew of Tinkerbats. Risky seizes the lamp for herself, and Shantae attempts to get it back, but is ultimately knocked unconscious. Furious that Shantae failed her job as the town's guardian Genie, the mayor fires Shantae from her position. Even without her job as the guardian Genie, Shantae still resolves to retrieve the lamp and put a stop to whatever Risky has up her sleeve, or cuff. Mimic informs Shantae that there's more to the lamp than meets the eye, but for Risky to unlock its full power, she needs 3 magical seals. These seals are scattered around Sequin Land, each possessed by a baron. Determined to obtain the seals before Risky does, Shantae sets out on another adventure. Wayforward did not let the advancement in hardware go to waste, as the visuals have received a massive upgrade. The sprite art looks fantastic, rich in color and detail alike, and the new animations do a lot to add character to the world, especially Shantae's little bouncing when she is idle, as it fits her upbeat personality perfectly. They've also added character portraits during dialogue, which look nice, though they maybe could have had a few more expressions and poses for each character. Shantae, despite appropriately having the most portraits of the cast, doesn't have a single one where she's smiling, which feels contrary to her personality. Meanwhile, Mimic only has one portrait with this little smile of his, maintaining it even when he's freaking out about the potential end of the world. All he can do is smile through the pain. Risky's Revenge maintains the series' delightful sense of humor, providing plenty of funny dialogue to elevate even the unnamed NPCs. I don't think any of the jokes made me laugh out loud, but they were a consistent source of sensible chuckles, maintaining a smile on the player's face during their adventure. Risky's Revenge is still a Metroidvania style of game, placing Shantae in an open map and slowly allowing the player to explore more of the world as they find additional power-ups. You'll have to traverse the overworld, Sequin Land, using magic and our half-genie's signature hair whip to take out enemies and reach the game's dungeons. This task is helped by the camera being more zoomed out than the original, which makes it less likely for enemies to get potshots on you once they appear on screen. Something new introduced in Risky's Revenge is the ability for Shantae to step on these platforms and switch planes to the foreground or background. It does a good job of making areas feel bigger without being just a long stretch of land, but this idea goes heavily underutilized. Aside from the main hub, Scuttletown, this mechanic is only used in the first area of the game, the forest area. Once you've defeated the first Baron and moved on, the plane switching will never be seen again, which is just so jarring. If they're going to introduce this new method of exploration, why abandon it after just a single area? And even in that area, there's only one time you really need to use it to solve any puzzles. They could have gotten clever with the level design using this gimmick, but sadly it appears to be nothing more than wasted potential. You'll fight a couple of enemies, move into the background a little, and eventually reach the first of the game's dungeons. These dungeons have a larger focus on puzzle solving and clever platforming. Alongside a magic seal, these dungeons are also where Shantae will obtain her animal transformations. The transformations are disappointing, as Risky's Revenge only has 3, less than the original's 4, or technically 5 if you include the Gameboy Advance exclusive Tinkerbat. And of these 3 transformations, 2 of them are returning ones, those being the monkey and elephant, which allow Shantae to cling to walls and break through stone respectively. The spider and harpy transformations got the axe, and though it's likely no one will shed any tears over the spider, as it was just a less fun monkey, the removal of the harpy is a shame, being a great tool for flying over obstacles and traveling around when trying to get a 100% item completion rate. The only new transformation to Shantae's arsenal is the mermaid, which, while basically useless on land, can swim underwater, allowing our half-genie to easily traverse underwater caverns and search for secrets. The mermaid is fun to use, and the inclusion of underwater segments is a solid additional method of travel. However, it's heavily underutilized compared to the monkey and elephant. The mermaid is the last transformation you obtain, right before the endgame, so much of the game isn't designed around having the mermaid, relegating it to only a handful of sections and a couple of remaining collectibles. Shantae's transformations are certainly underwhelming in this title. If the selection was going to be limited, it would have been preferable that all 3 transformations were brand new, so the player wouldn't be using almost the exact same abilities as the first game. Still, Wayforward should be praised for how they altered how to perform these transformations. In the original, the player needed to press inputs at a particular rhythm in order to transform. While it was a neat idea, having to do these inputs continuously slowed the game down. Here, all the player needs to do is hold down the dance button, and then release it during one of Shantae's poses for a particular transformation. First pose is the monkey, second for the elephant, and third for the mermaid, overall making the transformations much snappier, which was appreciated when needing to use multiple transformations to get to one of the hidden items. Risky's Revenge, outside of gems needed to purchase items from the store, has 2 types of collectibles. First are the heart containers, which can boost the amount of health Shantae has by 1 heart. The second is Magic Jam. Magic Jams are much more common to find than heart containers, and can be used to buy upgrades in the shop. These can include faster whipping, turning Shantae to a headbanging demon, and magic, such as a fireball that shoots a forward projectile, and the pike ball, allowing a damaging ball of death to circle around Shantae to damage enemies. Another appreciated alteration is the significant reduction in need to farm gems in this game. Players are comfortably able to upgrade their abilities just by naturally playing the game, and a large part of this comes from magic no longer being one-use consumable items. Now, magic items purchased in the store becomes a permanent part of Shantae's abilities, using this magic meter by her health, which can be restored by items dropped by enemies. It's a fantastic change, completely removing one of the core issues from the original. And really, that's perhaps the biggest praise of Risky's Revenge. At its core, it's a remarkably similar game to its predecessor, boasting similar transformations, gameplay, and structure. Yet it feels like Wayforward looked back on what worked and what didn't, and has mitigated, if not outright removed, nearly every complaint from the original. The life system has been abandoned. Now the game is more in line with other Metroidvanias, as should Shantae fall into a bottomless pit or step on spikes, she instead will only lose a small portion of her HP, rather than immediately lose a life. Perhaps one of the biggest fun killers from the original was its backtracking. Backtracking is inevitable in any Metroidvania. It's essentially built into the genre. However, the amount in Shantae was simply too much, as each section consisted of long stretches of enemies and bottomless pits that were repetitive and agonizing to constantly travel through. There was a warp system in place, but a warp location could only be activated by finding 4 warp squids per location, which some players just may not have done. Here, the need to find warp squids has been entirely removed, replaced instead with warp statues. The player will find nearly all these warp statues naturally as they explore, as they're very difficult to miss. And once they've been found, all you need to do is walk up, press A, select yes, and boom, that statue is now available to warp to. Not once was there ever frustration by backtracking because the process had become a cinch to do, and with a much larger selection of warp points available, you'll never need to travel far to get to where you need to go next. And even when you do need to repeat previously explored areas, the blow is softened by being able to listen to the game's excellent soundtrack. American composer Jake Kaufman returned to do the music for Risky's Revenge, and as always he does a bang-up job, making a varied soundtrack full of catchy tracks that are so easy to tap your foot to. I especially enjoyed the remix of Burning Town and Adventure, the song that plays when traveling through Mermaid Falls, but honestly there isn't a single bad track in the bunch. The team at Wayforward built upon the foundation of the original, and created what is all around just a better and consistently fun product. That's not to say the game isn't without a few pitfalls of its own, but thankfully these gripes are much easier to look past. First, the dungeon designs aren't quite as memorable. Much like the transformations, the number of dungeons has been reduced to only 3. And even then, the second dungeon barely has any platforming or puzzles, being relegated instead to a timed enemy rush. The only one that stood out was the third dungeon, Hypnobarons, as it had a clever puzzle element, with the direction the eyes are facing, changing where the doors lead you, which actually requires the player to stop and make use of the old noggin. And sadly, Risky's Revenge loses a lot of steam following the defeat of Hypnobaron, as the final act feels very rushed. The final dungeon isn't even a dungeon. It's just a short, side-scrolling shooting segment that leads directly to the final boss, and the first half of said final boss is just a repeat of the very first boss in the game, which makes the finale very anticlimactic, like we only got half a game. Risky's Revenge is all around just a smaller, shorter game than the original, with my playthrough taking a little under 5 hours to beat, compared to the original's 9-hour or so runtime, which will no doubt be disappointing to some. In this playthrough, I got 28 out of the 34 items as well, so going for 100% wouldn't be all that much longer. There are some pre-release screenshots of Shantae in a snowy, mountainous region, so it's possible that, whether due to time or budget, some parts of the game need to be scrapped for the final product. This would also explain the underutilized plane switching. Though the rushed ending is disappointing, the short runtime may not be a deal breaker to some. Risky's Revenge trimmed a lot of the fat of the original, so while the game doesn't last as long, it's more consistently fun during that limited runtime, which is more than can be said for the first title and its constant sources of frustration. Additionally, the player can get more mileage out of Risky's Revenge through the new magic mode, added in the director's cut, which unlocks once you've cleared the game for the first time. Magic mode changes Shantae's outfit to a blue dancer attire, and changes her properties around a bit. Now Shantae's defense is halved, taking double damage from enemies, thus making it much easier to die. The trade-off is now your magic abilities consume significantly less magic meter upon use, letting you go wild with your magic abilities. This mode makes the early game especially difficult, as you need to be very careful as you gradually repurchase all your magic abilities from the shop. But once you're loaded up, you'll really be able to go to town with your powers, making you a force of nature later on. It's a cool mode that changes things around enough to keep things interesting, and perhaps warrant a second playthrough for those interested. I quite liked my time with Risky's Revenge. The overall product is brought down a fair bit by introduced content, rushed finale, and abandoned ideas, but I also can't ignore how much effort went into improving the formula of the first game, which makes the minute-to-minute gameplay just all around better. Wayforward has found themselves a winning recipe. All they need now is the time and budget to cook up something really special. Not super sure why I'm using a cooking analogy in a game about dancing and platforming, but anyways, Shantae Risky's Revenge will take center stage in the number 24 spot. Not managing to inch higher than Pokemon Red, but it was certainly close. It's unfortunate that Risky's Revenge didn't feel like a full game, otherwise it likely would have been placed much higher, but certainly an improvement on the original, and hopefully things are only looking up from here for Shantae. And that concludes our look at Risky's Revenge. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and sharing your opinion down in the comments. Getting to see everyone's personal thoughts and feelings on a game is one of my favorite parts of these videos. Next time, we're going to look at one of the pioneers of the RPG genre, albeit with a bit of a facelift. Please look forward to that. In the meanwhile, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.